Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast. Today is Friday, July 3rd, 2020. Today we'll discuss Major League Baseball teams reporting to their spring training 2.0 and having some workouts and issues that are going on with some teams. We'll go over the KBO results from this morning and look ahead to the weekend's games. We'll recap yesterday's soccer games, look ahead to today's and the weekend's games. We will look at the leaderboard for the Rocket Mortgage Classic. We will talk about the NASCAR races for the weekend, and I'll give out picks for both the Xfinity and the Cup Series, and I'll do my 2013 Top 10 NHL players and games. All right, but first, we have to discuss some breaking news coming in the NFL that the Washington Redskins are looking into changing the name of its franchise. This is news that is shocking to me, considering that Daniel Snyder is one of the worst owners in all of professional sports, arguably the worst owner in sports. But I think that if they change the nickname of his professional football team, then I think he'll gain a lot of respect for it. And this is something that people in the media and just in general were calling for a couple of years ago, but they refused to acknowledge it. And now, while we're in a civil rights movement as a country, is when Daniel Snyder and the organization decide to look into changing the franchise's name. Like I said, they're going to gain a lot of respect for it. I think their fans would be behind it. And I think that this name change is going to lead to some more sports franchises and a lot of schools in college and in high school. Well, you've seen some high school names change, not necessarily nicknames, while going on in this unrest and civil rights movement, change either their regular names, like you see some Woodrow Wilson schools change its names, and you've seen some teams' nicknames change as well. I saw some schools remove Indians from their nicknames, so maybe the Cleveland Indians, once this Redskins thing happens, I think the Indians could very well see a name change. There's some other ones. I don't think Jerry Jones would change the name of the Cowboys because it's an iconic franchise. So I don't think the Dallas Cowboys would change its name. I heard a suggestion on Twitter that maybe Rangers would get changed. I don't think the New York Rangers would change their name because, again, we're talking about another bad owner here in James Dolan. But I don't think he would change the names of either of his two franchises, because in the Rangers case, it's an original Knicks team, and in the Knicks case, they were one of the first teams in the NBA. So I don't think that either of those franchises would consider changing their names. The Texas Rangers, I don't think would either, but it's one that I could throw out there in theory of a possibly or a maybe like a super duper long shot of doing it. So yeah, I think this Washington Redskins nickname change will lead to more sports franchises and schools changing their nicknames. And this is all, like I said, while our country is in a civil rights movement and a lot of unrest going on in our country as well. Now I'm going to talk about Major League Baseball Spring Training 2.0 coming back. A lot of stories coming out. Delino DeShields of the Indians tested positive for the COVID. So he will not be joining the Indians as of right now. He obviously came over in the trade that said Corey Kluber to Texas. It was him and then that pitcher I'm blanking on his name, but that pitcher, I think, is out for the season due to an injury. And he has to test negative twice before rejoining his teammates in Cleveland. Another big story is that Mike Trout is still uncomfortable coming back. His wife is obviously expecting and is due soon. And he's just worried about catching the virus and spreading it to his pregnant wife. And it's funny because you know who just gave birth? Amy Cole, the wife of Garrett Cole. And Garrett Cole is all about coming back. He's very happy. His wife just gave birth, and he said that wife and baby are doing well. And Garrett Cole, opposite of Mike Trout, is willing to come back and help his team win a championship. So part of me, I don't want to sound rude or anything while saying this, but part of me thinks that Mike Trout knows that his team isn't all that good. Meanwhile, Garrett Cole knows that his team is a championship contender. So that's just a conspiracy theory in me. And maybe Garrett Cole just wants to come back because he's confident in the team's doctors and he's confident in the medical staff, and he's cautious. And meanwhile, Mike Trout's just nervous. And meanwhile, I really don't blame Mike Trout for being nervous, because it was reported today that 9 players did not attend workouts today for the Angels, and Joe Madden is not allowed to reveal whether those 9 players tested positive for coronavirus or not. And those players have not opted out, though. So obviously the rumors are those 9 players tested positive, but you never know who did and who didn't. So there is an argument for Mike Trout being a little nervous. So those 9 players obviously are not with the Angels today. And then the 60-game season is obviously going to begin July 23rd or the 24th. And the rumor that came out that a lot of people are confirming is that the Nationals will be hosting the Yankees on the opening day, which would be as sexy as a matchup as it gets. Max Scherzer against Garrett Cole. So that should be a lot of fun for an opening day. And I mentioned Garrett Cole, how his wife's healthy and the baby's born healthy, and he seems very motivated to be back. And he's pretty much being like a reporter to the Yankees media. It's weird because he said that they're talking about the possibility of them versus the Nationals, and then he said that one of the players on the team, Brett Gardner, I believe it was, predicted that that would be the matchup. So that it was a good call there by Brett Gardner. So it looks like the Yankees are very motivated to be back, and they're certainly a team that can absolutely win the championship if everybody's healthy. And speaking of baseball, we'll move on to the KBO now. We will recap this morning's games and look ahead to the weekend. Samsung over LG 9-7. Doosan over Hanwha 2-1. KT over Kaiwoom 3-2. SK over Lotte 7-4. Kia over NC 8-2. Same matchups for tomorrow, all at 5 o'clock a.m. Eastern, but 6 o'clock p.m. out in Korea. You have the Heroes at the Wiz. You have the Eagles at the Bears, the Tigers at the Dinos, the Wyverns at the Giants, and the Twins at the at the Lions. And then on Sunday, all the games are at 4 o'clock a.m. Eastern, which would be 5 o'clock p.m. over in Korea. I'm going to say that Samsung wins these next 2 games against LG to bounce back after a loss. I think Latte will win both games. I think Kia and the Dinos will split. I think KT and Kaiwoom will split. And I think that Doosan will take both games from Hanwha. And now your updated standings before the weekend. You have the Dinos at 34-16. You have the Heroes at 32-23 back of the Dinos, 4 back in the loss column. The Bears are 30-21. They are a game and a half back of the Heroes, 1 back in the loss column. The Tigers are 27-21. They're a game and a half back of the Bears, but they're tied in the loss column. The Twins are 28-23. They're a half game back of the Tigers. They have 1 more win than the Tigers, but they're 2 back in the loss column. The Lions are 28-24. They're a half game back of the Twins, 1 back in the loss column. The Wiz are 24-27. They are 3.5 back of the Lions, 3 back in the loss column. The Giants are 23-26. So they're also 3.5 back of the Lions, but the Wiz have 1 more win and 1 more loss than them. And they're 2 back in the loss column of the Lions. I'm talking about Latte. The Wyverns are 15-36. They're 9 back of the Giants, 10 back in the loss column. And last but not least, the Eagles are 12-39. They are 3 back of the Wyverns. All right, now I'm going to recap the soccer games from yesterday and look ahead to the weekend. We'll start with La Liga. There are some interesting results in La Liga yesterday. Real Sociedad over Espanyol 2-1. Real Sociedad is 15-5-3, 50 points. Espanyol is 5-9-19, 24 points. Osasuna over Eibar 2-0. Osasuna is 11-11-11 with 44 points. And Eibar is 9-8-16 with 35 points. Real Madrid defeats Getafe 1-0. Real Madrid, that was a must-win for them. They're 22-8-3, 74 points. And Getafe drops to 14-10-9 with 52 points. One match today in La Liga. You have the Atletico Madrid against Mallorca at 4 o'clock Eastern. I'm going to go with Atletico Madrid. They're the much better team. Mallorca is one of the worst teams in La Liga. And I think Madrid should win by multiple goals. So I'm going to go with Atletico Madrid for today. Tomorrow you have 3. You have Celta Vigo against Real Betis at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. Celta Vigo is 7-13-13. Real Betis is 9-10-14. Tough call here. I'm going to go with the draw. I don't feel good about it. I think that would be some good value. So give me the draw between Celta Vigo and Real Betis. Valladolid against Alaves at 1:30 p.m. tomorrow. Valladolid is 7-15-11 with 36 points. And Alaves is 9-8-16 with 35 points. I am going to go with another draw here, but I don't feel strongly about it as I do with the other one. And at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, late afternoon, you have Granada against Valencia. Granada 13-7-13, 46 points. Valencia 12-10-11 with 46 points. So these two teams are pretty even. I am going to go with Granada here for the win. They are a better defensive club. These two teams are about the same in terms of an offensive club. So I'm going to go with Granada here to get the win here over Valencia. And then we have 4 games on Sunday. You have the Athletic Club against Real Madrid at 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. I got to go with Real Madrid. They have to hold off Barcelona. The Athletic Club is not a bad team. They're a good defensive team. but they obviously cannot score with Real Madrid. So give me Real Madrid on the road there. And then you have Espanyol and Leganes, the two worst teams in the sport. I'm going to go with the draw here because, quite frankly, I can't pick either of them to win. Osasuna and Getafe at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. By the way, Espanyol and Leganes is 11 a.m. Eastern. So 1:30 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. Osasuna and Getafe. I'm going to go with Getafe here. They are the better defensive team than Osasuna. So I'm going to go with Getafe here on the road. And last but not least, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, you have Villarreal and Barcelona. This is going to be a really good game, I think. But to me, the difference here is that Barcelona is just a much better goal-scoring team led by Lionel Messi. So give me Barcelona over Villarreal on Sunday afternoon. And now to the Premier League. You have a couple of notable results from yesterday. You had Manchester City over Liverpool 4-0. Manchester City needed that game 21-3-8, 66 points. Liverpool 28-2-2 with 86 points. I did say that Man City needed that to rebound from the Chelsea loss. So that was a good win for Manchester City. And then Sheffield United over Tottenham 3-1. Sheffield United's 12-11-9 with 47 points. And Tottenham drops to 12-9-11 with 45 points. No games today, but you have a bunch tomorrow. 7:30 a.m. Eastern time, you have Norwich City and Brighton. Norwich City is obviously better than Norwich City. Brighton is 7-12-13, 33 points. Norwich City 5-6-21 with 21 points. Brighton's better than Norwich City, so give me Brighton, and I think they'll win a close game. 10 o'clock a.m. on 4th of July, you have Leicester City and Crystal Palace. Leicester City 16-7-9 with 55 points. Crystal Palace 11-9-12, 42 points. I think Leicester City has to bounce back and win here. So give me Leicester City to bounce back here and win after a disappointing loss the other day. 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. I'm sorry, 10 o'clock. Manchester United against Bournemouth. Manchester United 14-10-8, 52 points. And Bournemouth 7-6-19, 27 points. Man United is going to destroy Bournemouth. Bournemouth is one of the worst teams in the Premier League. Manchester United is going to go out and win by multiple goals. 12:30 p.m. Eastern, you have Wolves and Arsenal. Wolves 13-6, 52 points. Arsenal 11-13-8, 46 points. Both of these teams, I think, are pretty solid. Wolves is better defensively, but Arsenal, I'd say, is a little bit better offensively. But I'm going to go with the draw here. I think both of these teams can score, but I think it's more likely that Wolves wins than Arsenal wins. So give me the draw between Arsenal and Wolves. It was too tough of a call to actually say that I was with conviction that the Wolves were going to win. And then 3 o'clock p.m. tomorrow, you have Chelsea and Watford. Chelsea 16-6-10, 54 points. And Watford 6-10-16, 28 points. This is a classic bounce back spot for Chelsea. That was a bad loss the other day. I think they're going to go out and perform and play well and win at home to shrug off that bad loss against West Ham. So give me Chelsea tomorrow afternoon. And then you have 4 games on Sunday. You have Burnley and Sheffield United at 7 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. Burnley is 13-6-13 with 45 points. And Sheffield United is 12-11-9 with 47 points. This is a secretly good match. I think a better match than giving credit for. I think Sheffield United is more of a defensive team and Burnley's more of an offensive team. And they're not really good at keeping the ball out of the net. So give me Sheffield United on the road here in that one. Sunday, 9:15 a.m. Eastern Time, you have Newcastle and West Ham. Newcastle 11-9-12, 42 points. West Ham 8-6-18, 30 points. I'm definitely going with Newcastle here. West Ham's going to have a letdown after that loss. After the Chelsea win. So, give me Newcastle all day, every day, at home against West Ham, as West Ham has a letdown. 11:30 a.m. on Sunday, you have Liverpool and Aston Villa. Liverpool's obviously the best team. 28-2-2, 86 points. Aston Villa is one of the worst teams, 7-6-19, 27 points. This is your classic bounce-back spot for Liverpool, although they have really nothing to play for, but they're just better than Aston Villa. So give me Liverpool at home against Aston Villa. And then 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, you have Southampton and Manchester City. Southampton, 12-4-16 with 40 points. Manchester City, 21-3-8, 66 points. I'm going to pick Man City, but I won't be surprised if it's a closer game than people expect because Manchester City's coming off the good win over Liverpool. And where's the motivation? That whole thing. But I'm going to go with Man City, but I don't feel super duper about it. So give me Man City. And now I'm going to go over the Bundesliga result from yesterday, which was a 0-0 draw between Werder and Heidenheim. As Werder goes to, they're still 8-7-19, 31 points. But we discovered yesterday that Heidenheim is not a Bundesliga team. It is a team from another league. Now we'll get into golf and the leaderboard for the Rocket Mortgage Classic. It's going to be an interesting tournament. On top of the leaderboard right now is a 4-way tie between Bryson DeChambeau, Seamus Power, Matthew Wolff, and Mark Hubbard. The fact that Bryson DeChambeau is in the lead right now is really a good sign for him in his quest to win this tournament. In a tie for 5th, you have Kevin Kisner, you have Seth Straka, and Brandon Hagee. Tied for 8th, you have Doc Redman, you have Brian Stewart, you have J.J. Spawn, you have Matt Wallace, and you have Hudson Swafford. Tied for 13th, you have Chris Kirk, Victor Hovland, Ted Porter Jr., Luke List, and Mark Anderson. In the tie for 18th, you have Michael Thompson, you have Chris Baker, Brendan Todd, Chris Stroud, Steve Stricker, Harold Varner III, Henrik Norlander, and Scott Stallings, who isn't supposed to tip off for another minute or so. In the tie for 26th, among some notables, you have Fabian Gomez, you have Wesley Bryan. It's a pretty big tie here. You have Zach Schuster, you have Ryan Gibson. In the tie for 40th, you have Ricky Fowler, Lucas Glover, Jonathan Bird, No-Sing Yul, among notables, as well as Hideki Matsuyama. In the tie for 52nd, you have James Hahn, among notables, Bill Haas. It's a big tie for 52nd. Jason Day's in there. You have Webb Simpson in there, who's not supposed to go off for another couple minutes. In the tie for 70th, you have a couple people in there as well, such as Im Sujay, Austin Cook, Tyler Duncan, Brendan Grace, and Josh Teeter. And there's more as well, such as JT Poston and Aaron Wise. In the tie for 87th, you got Bubba Watson and Patrick Reed. In the tie for 103rd, you have a bunch of people in the mix as well. And same for the tie for 120 as well. There's a lot of guys that have not even tipped off yet. And obviously, we are going to recap this event on the podcast on Monday. My pick to win this was Patrick Reed at 16-1. But the fact that Bryson DeChambeau is in the lead makes me think that he is probably living up to that plus 650 number. I guess they were right. I guess there must have been a gigantic bet on Bryson DeChambeau that made him plus 650. But he's living up to it right now. So, good for Bryson DeChambeau, but he just has to come out on top for me to be saying that he deserved that plus 650 emphatically. Now I'm going to pick the NASCAR races. For the weekend, we'll start with Xfinity from Indianapolis. The starting lineup, you got Jeb Burton, Michael Annett, Brandon Jones, Ryan Sieg, Justin Allgaier, Harrison Burton, Anthony Alfredo, Noah Gragson, Ross Chastain, Austin Cindric, Justin Haley, Chase Briscoe, Jesse Little, Mike Wallace, BJ McLeod, Brett Maffitti, Jade Budford, Jeremy Earnhardt, Preston Padres, Josh Williams, Jeremy Clements, Alex Labb, Riley Herbst, Brandon Brown, Tommy Joe Martins, Myatt Snyder, Kyle Weatherman, Stephen Licht, Joe Graff Jr., AJ Allmendinger, Cody Vanderwall, Bailey Curry, Matt Mills, Timmy Hill, Vinnie Miller, Stephen Parsons, Chad Fincham, and Brandon Godvick. So my pick here to win this race tomorrow afternoon, Chase Briscoe. He's been racing very well since the season resumed. He is 6-1 on DraftKings. I think it's a little overvalued for him, but I'm just going with my gut here. So I'm going to go with Chase Briscoe to win tomorrow at the Brickyard. And now over to the Sprint Cup. Your starting lineup: Joey Logano, Kurt Busch, Alec Bowman, Jimmy Johnson, Eric Almirola, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, Chase Elliott, Kevin Harvick, Ryan Blaney, Tyler Reddick, Ryan Newman, Matt DiBenedetto, Austin Dillon, Bubba Wallace, William Byron, John Hunter Nemechek, Chris Buescher, Matt Kenseth, Clint Boyer, Eric Jones, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Joey Gase, Brennan Poole, Michael McDowell, Garrett Smithy, Ty Dillon, Cole Custer, Corey LaJoie, Ross Chastain, Quinn Houff, J.J. Yeley, Christopher Bell, Ryan Preece, Daniel Suarez, Timmy Hill, Josh Bilicki, and B.J. McLeod. I'm going to go with Brad Keselowski to win this race. He has good history at Indy. He's plus 750. Kevin Harvick, I think, was extremely overvalued at 4-1. Him, Kyle Busch, and Denny Hamlin should all be in the 6-1 range. I think Brad Keselowski should be 7-1. He was plus 750, so I think he's a little undervalued. So I'm going to go with Brad Keselowski here to win Sunday's race at the Brickyard. And now I'm going to do my 2013 top 10 NHL players with some honorable mentions. I'll start with the honorable mentions. Martin St. Louis, Tampa Bay Lightning. The Lightning were not good that year, but Martin St. Louis had a great year. Pavel Datsyuk, Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings got off to a slow start in the West. That was their last season in the West before they moved to the East. And Datsyuk was great in that season, helping lead the Red Wings to the second round of the postseason. And then they blew a 3-1 lead, which we'll get into in the top games. Antti Niemi, San Jose Sharks. Niemi had a great year in net for the Sharks. Helped take them to a Game 7 against the then reigning Stanley Cup champion Los Angeles Kings. PK Subban, Montreal Canadiens. He had a great year that year. He had a Norris Trophy caliber season, although they did lose in the first round to Ottawa. Craig Anderson, Ottawa Senators. He had a fantastic year that year. And he helped lead the Senators to the second round. And now my top 10 NHL players of 2013. 10, Steven Stamkos, Tampa Bay Lightning. This was his coming out party season. And really proved to everybody that he was worth that number 1 overall pick back in 2008 for the Tampa Bay Lightning. 9th, Carey Price, Montreal Canadiens. Carey Price was great that season. Helping lead the Canadiens to a division title. 8th, Patrick Kane, Chicago Blackhawks. He was obviously the Conn Smythe Trophy winner, which is the playoffs MVP. He had the hat trick in the conference finals clincher, which we'll get to in the next segment. 7th, Ryan Getzlaf, Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks won the Pacific Division that year, although they lost in the first round to the Red Wings. 6th, John Tavares, New York Islanders, a third-place finish in the Hart Trophy voting. He was just awesome that year, carrying the Islanders to the postseason, although many people felt that that season was a fluke because this was a shortened lockout season and there were better teams than the Islanders that missed the playoffs. Number 5, Sergei Bobrovsky, Columbus Blue Jackets. He was awesome that season after Philadelphia traded him to Columbus. And Columbus was off to a surprising start and nearly made the playoffs that season. 4, Henrik Lundqvist, New York Rangers. Henrik Lundqvist, I think if there was a full season, the Rangers would have probably been a higher seed in the Eastern Conference, and he probably would have won the Vezina Trophy, but he was unbelievable that season. And the Rangers got off to a slow start, and then they wound up in the postseason as a 6th seed, and then beat the Capitals in 7, and then they lost to the Bruins in 5. Although the what if for the Rangers is if Toronto doesn't blow that lead in Boston. What if? And they play the Maple Leafs in the second round that year, and maybe they win that series and are in the conference finals against a vulnerable Penguins team. Well, Penguins team turned out to be a little vulnerable because Marc-Andre Fleury was just not performing up to expectations in the postseason as he was benched in the postseason that year. 3, Alex Ovechkin, Washington Capitals. Yeah, he won the Hart Trophy, but the Capitals lost in the first round to the Rangers. So I kind of have that against Ovechkin, although that was more of a team thing than a individual thing. But that was just not a good look for Ovechkin at the time, so that made me punish him a little bit. 2nd, Jonathan Toews, Chicago Blackhawks. Him and Patrick Kane were obviously the best 2 players on the team that won the Stanley Cup in the shortened season. Many people thought that had an asterisk by it, but to me that wasn't an asterisk championship because the same Blackhawks team pretty much won the Stanley Cup not only 3 years prior, but 2 years later as well, as they had a little dynasty going in Chicago. So I wouldn't really consider that an asterisk championship like some others in the sports world have. And number 1, Sidney Crosby, Pittsburgh Penguins. He was the best player in the NHL at the time. Still arguably is, as crazy as that sounds. Helped lead the Penguins to a division title and the conference finals. So, my pick for the top NHL player of 2013, Sidney Crosby. And now I'm going to do my 2013 NHL top 10 games. There are a lot of honorable mentions on the list. 6 of them. Bruins Rangers, January 23rd, 4-3 Rangers overtime win. Marian Gaborik with a hat trick as the Rangers lost their first 2 games to Boston and Pittsburgh respectively. And then they get revenge on Boston on Wednesday Night Hockey on national TV. Doc Emmerich with a great call. So give me that game to be in the top 10 between those 2 original 6 franchises. Stars Bruins from November 5th. So this was in the next season, but the same calendar year. A 3-2 Stars shootout win in Boston as Rich Peverly and Tyler Seguin returned to Boston, as that was a franchise-altering trade for the Stars and a bad trade for the Bruins. And let's face it, the Bruins probably have a couple Stanley Cups had they not traded Tyler Seguin away. Pens Habs, March 2nd, a 7-6 shootout or overtime win on a goal by Brandon Sutter between 2 teams that wound up winning their respective divisions. Rangers Capitals May 10th. Game 5, 2-1 Capitals overtime win on a goal by Mike Ribeiro as the Capitals went up 3-2. This game did not make the top 10 because the Capitals lost the series to the Rangers. Kings Blues on May 8th, Game 5, 3-2 Kings overtime win on a goal by Slava Voinov as the Kings went up 3-2 in that series. And the last of the honorable mentions, Canucks Sharks, May 7th, Game 4, 4-3 San Jose win on a goal by Patrick Marleau to complete the sweep. As the Sharks went on to the second round, and that was the end of Alain Vigneault in Vancouver. And now the top 10. 10th. Ducks, Red Wings, May 10th, Game 6, 4-3 Detroit overtime win to stave off a home elimination on a goal by Henrik Zetterberg. And then the Red Wings wound up winning Game 7, 3-2 in regulation in Anaheim to go to the next round to play the Chicago Blackhawks. 9th, Penguins, Islanders, May 11th, Game 6, 4-3 Penguins overtime win on a goal by Brooks Orpik. That was the Islanders and John Tavares' sort of coming out party series, even though they lost. John Tavares had an awesome series, was the best player in that series, although I mean that by the player that played the best in that series. And they were in high-scoring games with the Pens, which led to them benching Marc-Andre Fleury. But Brooks Orpik came through for the Penguins as they wound up winning that series against the Islanders. 8th, Penguins, Bruins, June 5th, Game 3, 2-1 Bruins double overtime winner on a goal by Patrice Bergeron as the Bruins went up 3-0 in the series. 7th, Bruins, Blackhawks, June 15th, Game 3, 2-1 Boston overtime winner on a goal by Daniel Paille. I'm sorry, it was Game 2, not Game 3. That was a mistake on my list. But yeah, Daniel Paille, overtime winner for the Bruins to even up the series at 1 apiece. 6th, Kings Blackhawks, June 8th, Game 5, 4-3 Blackhawks double overtime win on a goal by Patrick Kane, which was a hat trick for Kane as the Blackhawks advanced to the Stanley Cup Final. 5th, Blackhawks Bruins, June 19th, Game 4, 6-5 Blackhawks overtime win on a goal by Brent Seabrook as the Blackhawks evened up the Stanley Cup Final at 2 apiece. 4th place, Red Wings Blackhawks, May 29th, Game 7, 2-1 Blackhawks overtime win on a goal by Brent Seabrook to advance to the Western Conference Finals. That was the Red Wings' last game, last series in the Western Conference before moving to the East. They had a 3-1 series lead. Chicago, to their credit, won the series, although you could argue the Red Wings probably should have won the series, but hey, give Chicago credit. They were the better team with arguably the better goaltender. Jimmy Howard played really well for the most part in that series to keep Detroit in that series, but ultimately Chicago Stars came through and they went to the Western Final. And by the way, the Blackhawks would have taken a 2-1 lead in regulation, but the goal was waved off because of an offsides, which wasn't really an offside. So you could argue Chicago should have won that game in regulation. 3rd place, Bruins, Blackhawks, June 12th, Game 1, 4-3. Blackhawks triple overtime win in Game 1 of the final on a goal by Andrew Shaw. That was one of the best Stanley Cup Finals as ever between the Bruins and the Blackhawks. And you had the 3 overtime games in Games 1, 2, and 4, including this triple overtime thriller. Corey Crawford really was out of his mind. Tuukka Rask was out of his mind as well. But Chicago prevailed in Game 1. 2nd place, Maple Leafs Bruins, May 13th, Game 7, 5-4 overtime win for the Bruins on a goal by Patrice Bergeron as they came back from a 4-1 deficit to win the game. That was a huge what-if, as I mentioned earlier. As the Maple Leafs would have won that series. They are in the second round against the Rangers. Maybe the Rangers are in the conference finals against Pittsburgh with Marc-Andre Fleury struggling. So that's a huge what-if. Or maybe the Penguins bounce back and they wind up making the final. But yeah, that's a huge what-if right there, if not for that Boston comeback. And number 1, Blackhawks, Bruins, June 24th, Game 6, 3-2. Chicago wins in regulation to win the Stanley Cup. They were down by a goal with less than 2 minutes to go. They tie the game with the extra skater on, and then they take the lead, and then they wind up winning the cup. So it was a dramatic regulation game that had to be number one on the top 10 NHL games list for obvious reasons, and that was probably the best Stanley Cup final over the last 10 years between the Blackhawks and the Bruins. So that's it for the show today. I'll be back on Monday recapping all the fun stuff from the weekend from golf, NASCAR, KBO, and soccer. Any news related to unrest or COVID, I'll have for you on the show as well. Next week, we're back to redrafts. We haven't done those in a while because we want to catch up on years. So 2012 redraft. We'll do the NFL on Monday, the MLB on Tuesday, Thursday the NBA, and Friday the NHL. And Wednesday we'll maybe have a mock draft for the NHL or the NBA. So that should be a lot of fun as well. And also next week, at the end of the week, I'm going to have guests on the podcast to go over my bracket of glory, including George Brew, the host of the What's Brewin' show that I've been taking part of on Fridays or even occasionally Saturday nights. And one of my partners on the show, Dan Wheeler, will be joining me as well. Bobby Thompson of the G&T Sports Podcast and Nick Caruso of Sports Dudes will be my four gentlemen that will be joining me analyzing a certain region, one region per person for that as well. So it should be a fun week ahead for the show. And I hope you guys have a great weekend, everyone.